This is why many bosses force their subordinates to work long hours, because it was the right way to raise profit in the past. 皆さんこんにちは and welcome to Let's Ask Shogo. You might know that Japan is a country with quite a lot of rules and manners for everything we do. For example, there are many table manners when you eat food, rules for bathing at onsen hot springs, or things you must keep in mind when you visit someone's house. This can be also said for many workplaces in Japan too. Although I understand that these traditions are originally meant to respect and care for others, some of them are just simply outdated and are very inefficient. So today, as a man who has worked in 3 Japanese companies before, I will introduce 5 most tiresome business rules that are still present in most workplaces in Japan. This video is especially recommended to those who are willing to work in Japan someday. I will be counting down the 5 outdated rules, so I hope you can check them all out. If you have similar rules in your country too, please let me know in the comments below. At the latter half of the video, I will talk about why Japan still has these outdated rules, and what you can do to avoid companies that forces their employees to obey them. However, please understand that not all companies in Japan are like this, and it is likely that these rules will not be forced for foreign workers. Even if you get confused somewhere during the story, that's okay. I will wrap everything up again at the end of the video in today's conclusion. それでは本日も参りましょう。Number 5. Meeting in person. Many Japanese companies believe that everything from sales jobs, greetings, to meetings must all be done in person. The corona crisis has changed this rule a lot, but the idea of you must meet someone in person in order to be respectful still lingers in the Japanese working culture. For example, when a company hires a new person in the sales department, they will call their clients for time to visit their company in person. Just emails or video callings will be considered rude, and some people might think that you are not serious about the business. Let me tell you a story of my own. A person I've worked with before told me that she's going to be starting a new business and wanted my help with English skills and knowledge about Japanese traditional culture. I was very happy to help her out. But she then told me that she wanted to meet me in person to do a meeting, because that's the right way to do business. I wasn't convinced, but I thought she might have had something really important that she needed to discuss with me. So I ended up meeting her at a cafe that was about 30 minutes from my house. And as you can imagine, the meeting itself ended within 30 minutes, with nothing special but just chatting and talking about the new business. And there was no reason whatsoever to meet up in person. It took me the time and energy to get prepared leaving the house, heading to the cafe, and coming home in the cold winter. If we just talked over Zoom or Skype, it would have been over with about 20% of the time and energy that I actually used. To be honest, if I had that time, I would have been able to make a new video for this channel. I understand that if this was the first time working together, meeting up in person to get to know each other is a good idea. But we have worked together in many projects in the past, so there really was no good reason other than that's how it should be done. I feel that this culture is really inefficient and outdated. Number 4. Stamps and paper contracts. I think many of you know about the stamp culture, or hanko as we call it in Japan. You need to have a stamp of your last name in order to do literally everything, including renting a house, opening a bank account, contracting with a phone company, and so on. You also need the exact same stamp in order to change anything about these things. I once had an experience of trying to change my passcode for my bank account, and they needed my stamp I used when I opened the account. Because it was a bank account I opened when I just got into university about 10 years ago, I totally forgot which stamp it was that I was using. After sending papers several times, I finally found out that I used the oldest stamp I got from my middle school. It took me a month to just change a passcode for my own bank account. This stamp and paper contract culture exists within the business world too. According to the survey done by the Japan Institute for Promotion of Digital Economy and Society announced in 2018, the current rate of digital contracts used among Japanese companies is 43.1%. So this means that more than half of the companies in Japan still use stamps and paper contracts for everything. Please let me talk about my experience when I was working in the tourism industry. I used to work at a facility called Kyoto Samurai Experience, where foreign travelers were able to enjoy wielding a real sword and some Zen meditation. There was a traveling company that we worked with that sometimes introduced us to some groups of tourists once in a while. Every month, we had to make an invoice for them, and we had to take it to the company's reception. This company was about 20 minutes away by car from our facility, so every month I would ride my motorbike to deliver the invoice to them. There was once a time that the invoice had a mistake, and I had to go back again to deliver the fixed version. After I delivered the second invoice and came back, they gave us a phone call again, saying that the original one was correct, so they needed it back. I of course had to ride my bike to go to the company again, and my day was over by that time. If this was a digital invoice, you would need to just press a few buttons to fix and resend it. Just as easy as fixing a typo you made on your Instagram or Twitter post. It probably wouldn't take 5 minutes in total. But why not choose a more efficient option? It's because that's not how it should be. And digitized contracts just don't feel right. Number 3, upper and lower seats. In the Japanese business world, at meetings, dinners, and when riding taxis and elevators, who sits or stands where is very important. These positions are called upper and lower seats. You have to sit or stand in certain places, depending on the position of your company, how long you have been working, and your age. This is a culture unique to Japan, and it is supposed to be a way to show respect and hospitality to superiors and customers. But sometimes it gets very overwhelming. So let's do a quick quiz. Take a look at this picture. It is an upper view of a meeting room, and there are 4 people inside. Can you guess where the highest seat is? The answer is here. The basic rule is that the seat farthest away from the entrance is the highest seat. Then next, this is a picture of an elevator with 4 people in it. Can you guess where the 3rd seat is? It's right here. The closer to the door or entrance, the lower the seat is. But the lowest seat in the elevator is the one in front of the operation buttons. So the 3rd seat will be the other side of the elevator that is closest to the door. And when you get off the elevator, you of course must let the people standing in the back go off first. Then lastly, this is a picture of a taxi with 4 people riding. Can you guess where the lowest seat is? Did you think it's here because it's the closest to the side of the door where we get off? No, it's actually here in the front. This is because the person sitting next to the driver must give directions to the driver and do the payments. And the second lowest seat is in the middle of the back seats because sitting in between two people is not that comfortable. Not just these three situations I gave as examples, but it differs if you're sitting in a Japanese style room, a Chinese restaurant, or a bar counter. Yes, it's a lot to remember, but you will have to memorize everything and do it perfectly. Otherwise, you will lose trust from your clients or get scolded from your bosses. Why do we have to follow such a tiresome rule in Japan? Why is the seat farthest from the entrance, the upper seat, and the closest, the lowest? During the samurai era, if an enemy were to attack you in the room, the person closest to the entrance is the most vulnerable, and the person farthest away would be the safest. So this is why they kept the higher ranked person away from the entrance as possible to protect them. And left is always superior compared to right, because of an ancient culture introduced from China in the Asuka era. In China, it was believed that the emperor should sit with the North Star behind his back, so that the sun will rise from his left side and set on his right side. Are we ever going to be attacked by bandits during a business meeting? Or when we're riding a taxi? Are any of our clients an emperor that has to sit with his or her back against the North Star? No, unless you're living inside an anime or Hollywood movie. I would say that it's more important to keep the person who can work as a facilitator in the center of a meeting, and the person who's the most familiar with the area to sit next to the driver to give him directions. I must say, it's not a wise way to use your time trying to memorize where to sit or stand. If you have that time, you should put more effort into the business itself. I believe that would benefit your company and your clients more. But again, in Japan, following old traditions and rules are more important than actual results and efficiency. Number 2, business cards. As many people may have learned through this video by Christopher Broad of Abroad in Japan, business cards are another crucial part of business culture in Japan. Why do we need paper cards in a world with smartphones and SNSs? It is widely believed that business cards function as a kind of identification. These cards generally include your name, company name, department, and phone number. By disclosing these information by exchanging business cards, it's easier to trust each other because social credibility is guaranteed. If you do not exchange business cards, you will not be able to prove who you are. So it will be difficult to have someone trust you. Or at least that's what they say. This is why business cards are thought of as a representation of whoever you exchanged it with and must be handled with care. Next, let me introduce the 5 basic rules of exchanging and handling business cards. 1. Keep the business cards in special card holders. 2. Always stand as you exchange cards. 3. Do not hand cards over a table. 4. Use both hands to hold the corners of the cards and use your right hand to exchange. 5. Keep the other person's business card on top of your card holder and on the left side of the table as you sit. By the way, there are rules for what to say when you forget to bring your business cards, or if the other person has handed you a card when you were not ready yet. If there are multiple people exchanging cards at once, There is a certain order of people you need to exchange the cards with, according to your position in the company. It's crazy, isn't it? But these are some basic rules you must remember in your first years of working at a company. Otherwise, clients might think you are a person without common sense, and you will most likely lose occasions to work with them. I wish I could say this is a joke, but it's not. Now, I'm not here to say that all business cards are completely useless. There are occasions if you make an interesting designed card with, for example, your dream and passion written on it. People will remember you more, and you might have more chances to work with them. But I don't think that all the time and effort to do the procedures correctly and to memorize who will start exchanging cards first and lastly is a wise thing to do. It's so much more important to get the meeting started and actually make the process together. Number 1, working long hours is a virtue. In Japan, there's still an old idea of the longer you work, the more effort you're putting in. Working long hours, sleeping late at night is a kind of virtue. It's quite obvious for subordinates to work overtime if their bosses are still working, regardless of if that person has anything left to do. It's very awkward to say, お疲れ様です。お先に失礼します to your boss that is still at his desk and doing something. I would probably be too scared to say that myself. If you do something like that, your boss will recognize you as a person who doesn't have motivation towards work, nor understand how society works. You might lose your chances of salary increase or promotions, and people might start complaining about you behind your back. But as you can imagine, working long hours until late times does not actually increase your productivity. It just makes you look like you're working hard. Again, actual results and efficiency are not as important as traditions and the hierarchical relationship between the superiors and the subordinates. Although the situation is gradually becoming better due to new laws being dismissed, working for hours too long is still a crucial social problem in Japan. Studies done by the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare show that in 2018, people who have died of overworking from brain and heart disease were about 500, and suicides due to mental illness were about 2018. Some of these people have worked for 100 hours a week, not even being able to go home and almost living inside the company. However, the number of people who die from overworking is of course not very accurate because it's impossible to track everyone's situation after their death. There are some experts who say that the real number should be around 10,000 people who die from overworking every year, about 5 times the number the government is presenting. You also can't ignore the fact that Japan has the highest rate among developed countries of young people in their 10s and 20s committing suicide, and also the fact that Japan has more mental hospitals than anywhere else in the world. After listening to so many horrifying rules and facts, you may feel like fainting, but stay with me just a little bit more. Next, I want to talk about my opinions on why these things are happening. I believe that these are the 3 main reasons why the work culture of Japan is still so outdated. 1. The average age of people working is high. 2. The experience of high economic growth. 3. The lifetime employment system. 1. The average age of people working is high. Japan has the second highest average age in the world, 48.4 years old in 2020. This means that about half of the population in Japan is older than 50 years old. A so-called declining birth rate and aging population society. Actually, about 27.3% of the population is older than 65 years old, meaning that 1/4 of Japanese people are regarded as senior citizens. I'm not here to say that all old people are outdated and that new techniques are always correct. But taking a look at the results of the inefficiency and low productivity, I think we can't deny the fact that the older people in the management ranks are not willing to change, believing their way of business that brought them success in the past is still the best way to do it. The younger generation are responsible for this problem too. As I've explained in my video, Why You Must Be Normal in Japan, Japanese education raises children to be like robots, always putting the group before themselves, teaching them to constantly obey older people and not to question the system. This is why the idea of senpai senior and kohai junior is so important in Japan. So although there are many young workers complaining about their job environments, not many people actually have the courage to speak up. They believe that is something they just have to live with. 2. The experience of high economic growth. The people in the management ranks of most companies today are those who have experienced or have been taught by the people who have experienced the period of high economic growth of Japan. After the end of World War II, from 1955 to 1973 for 19 years, Japan experienced a rapid economic growth of 10% every year due to technological innovation. This is when manufacturers in the automobile, electromechanical, chemical, and shipbuilding industries have adopted innovative technologies from overseas and introduced new equipment, expanding the scale of the companies. People who were short of goods and struggling with their daily lives after the war were able to get new jobs and live rich lives due to the growth of the Japanese economy. In 1968, GNP jumped to second place after the United States, and Japan became an economic power both in name and reality. During the period of high economic growth, the more people worked and the companies manufactured goods, the more they made profit. This is because the whole country was a mass consumption society. Yes, there is a generation that still remembers this golden age of Japan. They believe that the way it worked in the special time that lasted for only 20 years is the best way to do business even today. This is why many bosses force their subordinates to work long hours, because it was the right way to raise profit in the past. However, the era of mass consumption ended a long time ago. Just manufacturing more and more products without a plan of marketing is just going to end up having a lot of unsold goods in the company. However, again, Japan is an old country, and there are many people who don't want to admit that their way of business is old-fashioned and that they need to accept the voices of younger generations. There are many researches that point out Japan will be in a negative growth situation by 2030. And in 2050, the GNP ranking that everyone was proud of so much will be in 7th place in the world. The golden age of the period of high economic growth is something far in the past, and it should be kept that way. 3. The lifetime employment system. During the period of high economic growth, Japanese companies were conducting a lifetime employment system and a seniority-based wage system. The seniority-based personnel system, which is premised on long-term employment, had the merit of efficient organizational management by hiring and training young workers. It also had the effect of increasing the workers' loyalty and motivation towards work because they can be promoted if they work for a long period of time. This unique Japanese managing method supported Japanese companies during the period of high economic growth. This is also the reason why Japan still has the job hunting season. This was a culture that started during the period of high economic growth for companies to supply the labor force efficiently. That's right. That's why Japan still has so many rules to educate the young to obey the seniority and to work like robots. This system was originally meant to hire the new labor forces forever, so they needed to teach them to keep order within the company. Because once you enter a company, your colleagues and bosses will stick around for literally your whole life. During the period of high economic growth, the more you produced, the more you made profit. So creativity and opinions of low-ranked employees were unnecessary and were just a waste of time. Of course, the lifetime employment system was meant to protect the young people in the past by assuring them their job and salary of their lifetime. Especially in the period of high economic growth, everyone was able to receive a very high salary too. However, today, there are many companies that easily fire their employees in emergency situations, and the salaries that the young workers earn are unbelievably low. This system of lifetime employment has clearly collapsed, and just the outdated business rules to make the young obey the seniors lingers on. This is a new generation. And the people working at the companies are not slaves. The companies will not guarantee you a lifetime long of work and money. I hope that more people will be able to work with freedom, being able to change their working environment anytime they want to. Finally, our last topic today. This is probably the longest video I've ever made. These are the 3 things, in my opinion, that you can look out for to avoid these tiresome and inefficient business rules. 1. The industry. 2. The region. 3. The company owner. 1. The industry. First, you need to take a look at which industry you're trying to work in. If it's an industry that has a long history in Japan, there is a high chance that the rules I introduced today will apply. Conversely, new industries like IT are quite young, so people working there are open-minded and are willing to accept change. 2. The region. Second, consider where you're going to be working at. If you work at the center cities of business in Japan, like Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya, there are many companies gathered in a small area, so the competition is fierce. These companies tend to have to accept change and take in new technologies in order to survive. Naturally, this will apply for rules inside the company too. Working in the rural areas in Japan might be nice and quiet, but it will be much more difficult to avoid the old traditional way of working, because many of the small companies can still survive by following them. 3. The company owner. Lastly, always keep an eye out for what the owner of that company is like. Even if it was a company in an old industry that is in the countryside, if that company owner is open-minded, there is still a chance that company is too. Take a look at their websites. Do they use the newest technology to make them? Does the company owner has his or her own SNS accounts or blogs, sending out information about what they do? And if there is some way to see the company, by any chance, like internships, take a careful look at how the workers there are working, as well as the atmosphere. Then lastly, today's conclusion. I introduced 5. Most outdated business rules in the work culture of Japan. Number 5. Meeting in person. Greetings, sales jobs, and meetings must be done in person to be respectful. Number 4. Stamps and paper contracts. More than 50% of Japanese companies still use stamps and paper for all kinds of contracts when the electronic system already exists. Number 3. Upper and lower seats. Who sits and stands where at meetings, dinners, in taxis and elevators is very important. This depends on your position in the company, how long you've been working, and your age. It is thought of as a way to show respect and hospitality to superiors and customers. 2. Business cards. Business cards are thought of as a kind of identification to prove who you are in order to gain trust from people you work with. There are many rules on how to handle other people's cards. Number 1. Working long hours. You should not leave before your bosses do, and will have to work overtime if they do. Otherwise, they will think that you are not serious about the job, and that you don't have common sense about how society works. There are mainly 3 reasons why these outdated rules still exist in Japan. 1. High average age. 2. The experience of high economic growth. 3. The lifetime employment system. Because the management generation are those who have experienced or have been educated from those who have experienced the period of high economic growth. The system that suited that time is still thought of as the best way to do business. However, the system has already collapsed, and just the rules remain. There are 3 things that I recommend to look out for in order to avoid these old traditions. 1. The industry. 2. The region. 3. The company owner. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If this video helped you to deepen your understandings towards work culture in Japan, please hit the like button to let me know. And my goal is to achieve 100,000 subscribers by January 2022, so your help would mean a lot. In this channel, you can take a closer look at Japanese traditional culture, tips on traveling to Kyoto, and social problems in Japan. So learners and lovers of Japanese language and culture, be sure to subscribe to enjoy more content. Thanks again, and I'll see you in my next video. どうもありがとうございました。Everyone, once again, thank you very much for watching this video and welcome to the Omake Talk. So as I was editing this video, I kind of thought I should explain a little bit more. Maybe some of you might have thought, like, if you don't like your job environment that much, why don't you just change your jobs, right? You know, just move on to a different company and such. So actually recently, like in my generations, this is actually getting the situation is getting a lot better. So it's a lot easier for people to just change jobs. There's many websites where you can find information about different jobs, and they're made for people who want to change jobs after working in 1 or 2 companies. You know, myself, I changed jobs quite a lot of times, but still, even in my generations and like my parents' generations, changing jobs was a complete taboo. It was something that you should never do. It's almost like, you know, getting divorced, you know, with someone you got married with. It's because, again, in Japan, we had the lifetime employment system. So it meant that your company, you know, kind of came up to you and said, I will take care of you for your whole life, right? I'll give you a job and I'll pay your salary for your whole life. And if you quit your job, it means you're kind of betraying your company. So it was thought of an action that someone who's very dishonest, very rude, you know, is kind of like this, you know, action. So it's impossible. It's something that you could never do. So I would definitely say it's very recent that it became common for people to change jobs. So that's another thing that I wanted to explain about today's video.
All right. So again, as I talked about in the beginning, if you have like similar problems in your country about, working culture and such, please let me know in the comments. I've never worked in a different country before, so I'm very curious if you can tell me a little bit about that. All right. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll be waiting for your comments. Goodbye.